This is Do It for a Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance.
I used to sit in front of the door of my shop and cry if Under Pressure from David Bowie came on. I mean, it sucked, but I wouldn't have changed any of that stuff because that's what's going to get us where we want to go as a company.
What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It for a Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now. So I got Jay Meagher, one of the team members at Real Street Performance. He's an online retailer from Florida that specializes in building engines and selling high-performance engine internals. These guys have a huge online presence, and they're a great resource for all things related to internal engine parts and performance parts in general. Jay and Real Street Performance have made a name for themselves on great customer service. So, Jay, how's it going, my friend?
It's going pretty good. Thanks for having me.
So, Jay, tell us a little bit about yourself and your business. How did you get started, and what's your background?
Get started working on cars or get started in the industry?
Both.
Well, when I was about 12 years old, my dad had me put head gaskets on a small block Chevy dump truck in a more or less a dirt lot, and the thing ran for like 10 years later until my little brother flipped it over in an intersection, and I couldn't tell you at 12 years old how I figured out how to put the distributor back in, but it ran and it worked, and then I just I started buying hot rods and tinkering. I think I bought my first car and took it to the track, and it was so disappointingly slow. I took it home and took the engine out the next day. So, I just kind of always been digging in.
Yeah. So you've been building engines since you were 12.
Well, no. That was literally a dirt lot repair, and it worked out in my favor.
Have you always been a mechanical guy?
Yeah. My brain's always kind of riding the dots. So how I slow down and relax is to work on stuff with my hands. It's kind of a relaxing thing for me.
So you're the founder of Real Street Performance, but you had mentioned that we wouldn't be where we are without the team that you have in place. Can you talk a little bit about that? Not taking credit for everything and just really kind of trying to give credit, like you said. It's a team effort, really.
Yeah. I mean, we don't there isn't a person at this company that isn't important, and we don't have any room for anybody that doesn't want to come along with us to meet our goals. So when I first started, I quit a job that I had had for 10 years, and I didn't necessarily have a plan. I just knew that I wanted to double my income. So I took out a small loan against my house and got like a 1,500 square foot warehouse and just started working on cars. And then about a year and a half later, Mark Conti came along, and he has a much different skill set than me. He has a hard time working a screwdriver, but he's a wizard when it comes to the moving of the product and buying and selling and maintaining the relationships with the vendors. And then in 2010, Gio Castillo and Clay Marsh came on, and Gio's just a selling machine. The guy sits down and he does the work of a couple people every day, and he's hardcore, and he pushes us to keep, if it were up to him, we would have 10 race cars, and he would be driving all 10 of them because he just has a pretty insatiable need for speed. And then Clay is just, he's got a very logic-based thought process that, helps us get the online presence that it takes to compete in today's market, because there's so many good guys out there doing the same thing we're doing.
Right. So how do you differentiate yourself,
It's tough. We're in a very price-driven market to where, I get a lot of support calls and people calling for help, and they didn't necessarily ever buy anything from Real Street, but but I try to do my best on helping them in the hopes that they will in the future. And if it weren't for the health of the company, I simply wouldn't have the time to give to try to grow the company, if that makes any sense, because we have it's a strange environment we're in nowadays. Everybody expects everything all the time because, the current place in society is pretty overstimulated, so you can have it all, or at least want it all in the moment.
Yeah, so you differentiate yourself then by trying to help. You're not just the guy out there selling parts, but you're trying to answer people's technical questions, and there's plenty of those. When
I was 16 years old and I bought, my first set of pistons for my hot rod, I couldn't afford to have that job go wrong. And the fact of the matter is it did go wrong, and it didn't go right until a couple of machine shops later, because the people that I were dealing with were more interested in kind of like closing the register and moving on to the next sale rather than helping people get through their build. So it's really interesting when you get someone from another part of the world that calls you, and that, it's kind of like if you don't help them make this build a success, then they're not going to be able to try again for a year because they just don't have the financial resources to have a failure or a catastrophic failure. So you really, I have some really cool kids calling me from around the world, and it's pretty neat.
I can't stress how important it is to answer people's questions, because really at the end of the day, it's not about just selling the part, but it's about advising the right part. And like you said, you can't afford it. You can't afford to have that go wrong. That's your everything. Like, right. That's all you got.
Yep. The price of these builds and the quality of parts available, it's out there, but the customer must have a decent alignment between what they want and what they can afford. And then as a retailer, you have to have a good set of ethics to say, well, this guy can't afford to do this $10,000 build. He's only got $4,000. So I think that I can take him for his $4,000, and maybe most of the parts will end up in a closet and he'll never do anything, but at least I got my money today. And that's a pretty sour way to do business.
Right. People put their heart and their souls into these engines. I literally have $100 left over, and you're going to put 110 into your head gasket or cams or whatever.
Yep.
It's every paycheck. It's whatever's left, and maybe even a little bit more. Eating more McDonald's and ketchup soup so that you can build an engine.
Yeah.
I've been there.
I understand. Me too. I put a lot of work into this, and starting off and not having the resources, I remember saving up for some cheap TRW pistons, and it was a big deal back then,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So I want to get an idea of Real Street Performance and kind of whether your company's product and service based. So I like to ask this question, that if you divided your business into 3 categories, one being service, one being what I call OPP, sale of other people's products, and then sale of your own specific products, how does Real Street fall into that? Service, OPP, and design of your own unique products.
I've been in the same area doing this since basically 2000. So I have a certain amount of locals that I'll probably always service, but we're mainly a sales-driven company. We have a 10,000 square foot of shop, and we have a chassis dyno and a dyno cell, and the dyno runs every day, and we work at that stuff every day. But the sales side of selling other people's products, products that we have a good relationship and it's a good product, that's the bulk of the company. And then as far as our own product would be the engines. Yesterday I built two JZs. It ended up being a pretty long day, but that's a pretty standard deal for us, is to get the engine work, because then it adds a good degree of accountability, because most people don't have the tools to measure and assemble an engine properly. So, we work with a couple machine shops, and we get a really good product out the door nowadays, and that's something pretty exciting for us as far as our own product.
Yeah. Your guys' engines that are going all over the world, I would assume.
Yeah, and it's pretty neat. You get logged on, do some team viewer work in another country on an engine you built, trying to get it tuned in. It's pretty cool.
right? Kind of surreal to
Yeah.
realize that you're tuning an engine, whoever knows how many thousands of miles away.
Yeah. Or I do some travel tuning, and that's always awesome too, because you really get outside. It's amazing how spoiled we are as Americans. And you go to some of the other countries where they have the access to the resources isn't as easy. So these guys they really try hard to get it done, and they don't really take no for an answer. So they're pretty fierce in the other countries, it seems.
Well, how do you manage to stay up to date with, like, I noticed that you guys are on social media and you guys are putting out like helpful content for how to assemble this engine or how to understand this concept. How do you manage to do that? And I was always impressed when we dealt with you with how your guys are able to follow up with a vendor and then follow up with us. It seems like you guys are juggling a lot of stuff. How do you do all that at the same time? Like, it seems like you have to have a pretty big team over there.
Well, we're a lot of guys, but it really comes down to being obsessed. If I had to write down 10 things I was good at, unfortunately, I mean, it's cars. I don't really know how to dance. I mean, this is my life. So we all are pretty engulfed in the company, and we hold ourselves to a pretty high regard. There's always going to be some things that slip through the crack, but we really try hard to, when you hang up the phone call with a customer, that the customer's business is going to be handled. We don't like negative press, and we don't like people being let down. If you miss an overnight, you know that you just wrecked that guy's weekend. So as racers and as enthusiasts, you kind of understand that connection. So it creates a little bit of an obligation in the staff to always be doing the right thing, because we're all car guys.
Right. So all of you guys are car guys. How do you make sure that you hire the right people, and that it's hard to find the right people, wouldn't you agree? How do you deal with that? You guys have a killer team over there, for sure.
Yep.
Everybody seems accountable and like they give a crap.
Yeah. I mean, we have, I would say 90% of the people that are here have been in the same circle for quite a long time, to where we have, a relationship. There's a couple of the newer members that are, less than a year in. But during the interview process, you've got 4 people that are sitting down and really grilling you, and some guys just aren't going to make it. Some guys are. I mean, it's just being a decent judge of character and trying to balance what that person's going to add to the team if you bring them on board.
Yeah. You think it's hard to find good people? People complain about that all the time, and I wonder how real that is. Like, how much time do you actually spend to find somebody good?
Well, you've got to keep in mind there's no training for this industry. There's no professional code of conduct. There's people that there's a window of opportunity between when they have an aptitude and when they've learned bad habits. And you can only hope that the people that come to the company as a new member had a decent mentor or were raised with a good code of conduct, that they're going to be accountable and responsible at their jobs. I mean, staffing in almost every facet is a nightmare nowadays.
And their true colors will show over time.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time. I mean, we run a pretty high duty cycle here. So if somebody can't, if somebody can't do what they're supposed to do here, then they can't stay, because in order for the company to get where it wants to be, everyone has to be pulling on the chain with the same tension. There's not really a lot of room for people to be screwing around. So
how do you make that decision, and when do you pull the trigger? You get a guy in and it's not working. Is it you go with your gut and it's time to get on to the next person?
I say that we're probably guilty of hiring too slow in that regard, because we are careful. Every opportunity, whether it be a customer or an employee, has a certain amount of liability to it. So you have to be really careful of who you let into the circle, because when I first started and I was just strictly mechanical, I had mechanics that maybe it took a year after they left before I really finished cleaning up all their mess. So I'm super cautious on who we bring on board because, this is my baby. This is what I've poured the last 10 years of my life into.
Yeah. And so you're literally the guy that's building the engines.
Yeah. That's really the work I do. Yesterday, I did nothing but, measure and screw together engines, and I left at like 10:30 at night, and I think I probably smiled all the way home because, that's the work I enjoy doing the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All drag racing stuff is what you guys mostly support?
It's street car stuff. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, with the amount of killer parts we have available, you have even with the addition of ethanol and everyone can drive around at all the power for a few bucks a gallon nowadays, the engines are definitely more stressed and doing more work on a day-to-day basis than they were a few years ago. So, you really have they may not be on a drag strip all the time, but they're being drag raced all the time. If that makes sense.
It's funny that 800 horsepower is like entry level now.
I know.
It's crazy.
My daily is a GTR, and I swear that if it was a four-door sedan with a little bit softer springs and wider seats, it would be a totally fine daily driver. And it's a 500 horsepower car. But once you get north of 800, things start to get a little bit more exciting.
It's just crazy over the years how that bar just keeps getting raised and raised and raised as the level of parts available, education and expertise grows in the industry.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Just strictly from a management standpoint, the common ECUs that are available nowadays can give you so much for the money that it's like you really don't have a good excuse to not have your act together nowadays because all the supporting products are within reach.
Yeah. So you started Real Street Performance 10 years ago, and you had a job before that. When did you know that you could do this full time? And when you did start, were you confident that it would work?
I don't think that I was confident that it would work, but I knew that I had to change. I knew that I wasn't going to get the same W-2 another year. So whether it be doing this or going back into the wild and doing something else, I wasn't going to stay at the same job anymore. I waited too long. I probably waited 2 years too long to make the change. So when I moved out on my own, it was shit or get off the pot time. I was not there to screw around. So I just put my head down and worked as hard as I could.
So you had to find a balance between making enough money and what you're super passionate about, firing yourself up in the morning, because you're going to have to wake up and work your ass off every single day, in and day out.
Yeah.
So people have – go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's a funny thing. I don't know if you've ever watched those videos C.T. Fletcher does, the dude that's always screaming into the camera about being obsessed with your passion. But that's pretty much – that's what it takes because this isn't easy money to earn, especially if if you are going to make an honest living in this industry and be able to walk around without looking over your shoulder, you're going to work your ass off because it's not easy,
There's a common misconception that I think that you wake up one morning and everything just falls into place. What do you think about that?
I think that that's overly optimistic. You can have you can be resilient. You can be disciplined. You could be smart. You could be sly. You could be a combination of all these things. But you've very few people in the industry, I think, have really mastered a balance between those. I think that again, going back to the teamwork that we have here, that's what creates that balance. Because if it was just one guy, the ceiling for growth would be fairly low because you only have one perspective of what's right, so you kind of limit yourself in that regard.
So it's not a single moment that was, aha, now I get it. But you built this business through building a team.
Yeah,
I mean that's the truth, right?
Well, I went 2 years by myself, and it was pretty nasty. I literally just went. I went in at 9, and I left at 11 or 12, and I would work for months straight. Until I got sick or just couldn't do it, and I'd take a day off, and I would go exactly back to the same thing. And it was, it was a lot of work back then.
That resonates with me because that's kind of my story too, where the plan was there was no plan. It was just wake up and work. And it sounds like you had a similar thing, and then you were able to meet the right people and work together. And that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with, is trying to do everything themselves and not allowing other people to work with them. And it's hard to find the people that, we're all just a cog in the wheel, and we have to find the complementary skill sets from the people that work with us. And it sounds like you guys have found that, and you're at peace with all the people that you have. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you have a good culture.
Yeah. There's nothing, there's always going to be speed bumps, but it's a total package. Like you could dislike the spoiler on a particular car, but if it serves a function, it needs to be there. And that's how things are here.
So I saw a picture on your guys' Facebook back around Christmas time where it was, the Real Street Performance Christmas party. And I remember looking at that and going, wow, those guys all seem like they're really good friends. Like everybody's got a legit smile on their face. And I don't know if everybody's just drunk or, or what, but it seemed real to me. And for some reason that image stuck in my head, and I feel like it's iconic. It's just cool to see that, to be able to build that build a successful company and forge friendships at the same time is, I don't know, it's something that I've struggled with myself.
Well, it creates, you have accountability to one another. That's the thing about partnerships. For a long time, I was afraid of partnerships, for, whatever reason. Maybe it was ingrained. My father was self-employed, but when it's just one guy doing it, unless he's Superman, he's going to need some help, and that's all big companies, all big, profitable, successful places. They have a board, and they discuss what's right for the company, what's right for the people, what's right in general. And I think that that's important to have that.
Yeah. Does your company get together on like a weekly basis and have sales meetings, or like little get-togethers of like 10-minute meetings, like, hey guys, this is what needs to get done? Something that our listeners can take away from, hey, this is how you guys do it and you guys are successful, to get them fired up and fill in the gaps between what they're doing now and what they could be doing to grow their business. You guys get together like that?
Yeah.
Or is it
every week we sit down and we meet. If there's a fumble that needs to be discussed, we discuss it and how we could, Clay is always working very hard to, if something develops a crack, his primary attention immediately goes to how to seal that crack and how to not let one happen again. So if we have an error on an order and it can be avoided, well, he changes the code, he changes the script on how we do things to not let that same problem happen again. And that, that's a really strong benefit. I don't think a lot of companies, aside from one of our competitors kidnapping him and, feeding him cheeseburgers and huge-breasted girls, I don't know how they could have it, because he's a pretty special guy in that regard.
Yeah. How do you get that buy-in?
Oh man,
the passion.
It's just, you could say that it's luck. It is what it is. It's what's happened to get it where it is today. Like I was reading through the dialogue questions that you sent, and there was like, explain the worst experience you've had in business. I used to sit in front of the door of my shop and cry if Under Pressure from David Bowie came on. It sucked, but I wouldn't change any of that stuff, because that's what's going to get us where we want to go as a company. Like no one here is high and mighty. No one here thinks that their shit doesn't stink. Everyone understands that if we're gonna double in size from where we stand today, that we're gonna have to make our best better all the time.
So good's not good enough. You got to be remarkable these days to make a wave, to make a statement, and to live in this industry. You have to be remarkable,
right? Because it's a price-driven market. If I have a 7065 on eBay CP and you have a 7065 on eBay, and neither one of us is going to break map, how am I gonna outsell you? How am I gonna get the guy to call me? I mean, if I said that we would put a little golden widget in the box and it's maybe some cookies or something, but I mean, for the most part, this is a price-driven industry. So you have a certain amount of customers that are not going to be loyal to you other than price, and you have a certain amount of customers that are going to acknowledge the integrity in your business and the what you offer the community, because this is just one big community. Whether you have a D series or a 632 big block Chevy, I mean, we're all just car guys, So what can we offer the community that's going to help us stand out to make people, that we're their reliable source to come to.
Right. So you touched on it for a second, and I want to go back to it. I want you to tell us the worst experience that you've had in business.
Oh, man. Well, I mean,
go there, for real.
Just being open about it. Like, I was ignorant in what I did. I took $17,000 of equity out of a house I bought when I was 21 years old, and I went and rented a warehouse space. And if it weren't for the motivation and the push I got from John O'Brien. John O'Brien is the guy that him and I drove around the country racing this little Mustang together, and he's every day he marches to the Pentagon and does some job that I'm not really sure I understand what he does, but I think he's just a tremendously overpaid manager. He said, we are going to do this, and he really pushed me out the door. But once, it's like going skydiving, it's going to happen, but when people start jumping out of the airplane, you're like, oh shit, this is really going on. So, it was an overwhelming time for me because I had to kind of rip the Band-Aid off of what was safe. I had the same paycheck for a long time, and I would buy a new street bike every year, and I would go on trips, and I had a comfortable little life. But in order for that to grow, that life had to come to an end, and I had to start something new. And it was I mean, I can't say that I think that my ignorance kept me out of being scared, but being resilient to failure and believing in myself is what kept me going. But there were some times that it wasn't fun,
Talk about one of those times.
Oh man, I distinctly remember one night I had finished building this Subaru EJ25 for a local guy named Scott, and it'd been like 3 days of having these pretty intense chest pains, and I was trying to get the heads on it, and I was having trouble breathing, and I'm like, man, if I could finish this engine up, I'm going to go to the ER and just make sure I'm not having a heart attack because I don't know what's wrong right now. So I finished the engine, and I drove to the hospital, and the doctor comes in, and he of course sees me as an invoice, so he's like, we want you to stay and get you checked out. And I was like, look, man, is this just stress related? Because if this is just stress related, then I know what's up. If you give me an AKG and I fail it, then we have another talk. But if it's just stress related, I got things to do in the morning. So I remember leaving the hospital, and I went and had dinner with a woman I was dating at the time, and she said, what is it going to take that you can't slow down? You're so obsessed with this working that you can't slow down even when you're on the brink of physical failure. And I was like, no, this is what I set out to do. Like, I know the competition. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are not honest in what they do. I know there's a lot of people out there that they stick things on an invoice that aren't in the build. And I want to fuck those people up. Like, I want to grow a big, healthy, honest business, and I'm not gonna stop until that's done.
Hoorah!
Yeah.
That's what I'm fucking talking about.
Yeah, it was a pretty badass time, man. It's one of my biggest obstacles right now is getting out of that habit. Getting out of the habit of having to work all the time. Like the past 8 or 9 months have been the first time that I've religiously taken weekends off outside of, an event or a race weekend. I go home on the weekend, and, after you get, whatever becomes your normal is your routine. So when you're in the routine, of years of working continuously, it's kind of hard to sit down and idle, and I think that.
How many years did you go without a weekend?
Well, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm crying. I mean, the first 8 or 9 years were pretty heavy, where I would take a weekend if I absolutely had to, but for the most part I was at work, and there was a tipping point. I think in 2011, I told my guys we had a goal. We had a goal for the company, and once we made that goal, I'm like, hey, I'm going to go to Europe for a month. And it's going to be a test to see if I can, A, do it, and B, enjoy it. And I didn't necessarily enjoy it because I was like
thinking about work the whole time.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was one morning I woke up, and of course I wasn't really being considerate of the time changes, but I called Clay and I'm like, tell me everything's okay. And he's like, dude, we're in the middle of a record month. And I'm like, march on. And I was busy trampling around in Rome, just 2 pairs of shoes because I was covering so much ground. I'd use one set for half the day and another set for that other half, and just was having an awesome time. And that was a really good feeling to get to that point where I could just do something like that. Because if I would have stayed at my job, I wouldn't have the access to the people and the fun. Like you mentioned Tony, like Tony's an awesome guy. I remember when I met Tony, I remember walking over to his car and I was looking at the car and I didn't see his name on the window, but I knew that he was a gadget guy. So I was looking at the car thinking, yeah, this has got to be his car, and there's a host of really neat people, like-minded people in the industry. And, if I would have stayed at my job, I wouldn't have met any of them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't regret that decision, obviously, looking back?
No, I mean, sadly, I have a couple friends that didn't move on with me, and their lives aren't any different than they were 10 years ago. And that bothers me a lot because you have to have a certain amount of the hunger to advance has to be stronger than your complacency,
And how much of it do you think is outside sources weighing in on you? You want to tell your mom, hey, Mom, I got a legit, reliable job, and your girlfriend, et cetera.
Yeah.
With benefits and all that. I feel like so many people think that there's security in that.
I don't know. I never knew any of that. I mean, my parents had a very laborious business, and, my mom would, whatever it took to make the household work is what we did. I mean, my father got hurt in '89. My mom started running the company. I missed almost a year of high school because there wasn't enough income in the household to support. So I stopped going to high school, and when things were stabilized, I was able to go back and, I finished on time, but it took a bunch of fuckery to graduate on time because I missed so much time because I was busy, kind of thrown into the mix. I mean, I was driving a dump truck around Orlando delivering stuff I didn't even have a driver's license. I mean, I rolled up to my driver's ed teacher's house to load wood with a knuckle crane, and I didn't have a driver's license. And after that, he never bothered me in class again because here this kid was driving a tandem axle knuckle crane around town, working for the family business. So,
I think you can drive a car just fine.
Yeah. I think, aside from teeing up a CRX into a telephone pole when I was like 16, I haven't crashed much.
That's super inspiring.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I checked out your Facebook a week ago, and I saw something about that post.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me because it seems to me that you got where you are because you're a really hardworking guy. and not, the keys weren't handed to you.
No. No, I'm very.
And there's a lot of honor in that, so I respect you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super blessed to have the, like there's a statement that I always kind of say. It's like you have to be smart enough to know how dumb you are, and you. With that being said, you acknowledge the help, and you acknowledge the growth that you must go under in order to get to your goals, And that may sound like some self-help bullshit that Paul Yaw will probably shake his head at, but you gotta, you've gotta be ready to grow, and that's you can do that, or you can be obsessed. I mean, that's good advice. I don't think I'm good at it because I'm just obsessed. If you tell me that I can slow down and live an easier life if I just answered emails at my desk, I'm gonna want to be out in the shop or be on the dyno or stuff like that because I love the work. The work is what I'm after.
I'm just taking a moment of reflection because that's what I'm after. Yeah. The work. It's about the process. Yeah,
I like it, man. I like you grab the snout of a crankshaft.
Why do people shy away from work?
Because it's what we've become, man. Not what we've become.
Why do people do that? It's about it's about waking up later and going home earlier for the most amount of money. Why is that the goal?
Well, if I had to do it in a minute or less, you have to look at what's happened in the country in the last 70 years. I mean, you had the Great Depression, then you had World War II and Rosie the Riveter and guys that were sent out in an airplane to go bomb a country with not enough fuel to come home, and they went out knowing they weren't coming back. That's what the Hoover Dam and the railroads and all this great stuff that this country built, and then we got lazy. I think that it actually is a benefit. If you want to be successful and you have the drive, there's no better time to do it because I think the majority of people are too self-absorbed in their own personal importance to want to do the work.
Well said. Jay, what are you not good at, man?
Oh, man.
And I'm not saying that in a way that you're good at everything. I just want you to tell us something that you're not good at.
I'm not.
You gotta handle a lot of things in your business.
I'm not good at. I'm not good at zooming out. If I get into a situation that's got me backed in the corner, I want to act in that moment, and I realize that in today's day and age you can't do that as much because there's a cost to doing business like that. So, if I have a situation or an altercation, there's a part of me that wants to kind of tell it like it is, and that's not always the smartest thing to do. So, that's one of the things that Clay helps me with is to be able to slow down and say, hey, zoom out a little bit. If it doesn't look good today, how's it look in a week? If it doesn't look good in a week, what's it look like in a month? If it's been a bad month, what's it look like in a year? I try to play that game because I'm not as patient as I should be for the amount of workload that I continue under. Like if you say, "Were you good at welding?" Yeah, man, I can glue metal together and it'll look okay when I'm done. I can't give you a stack of dimes, but I can weld, I can wire, I can tune, I can do all these things. But that's because you kind of have to when you go into this industry. You have to become your own best guy in a lot of aspects, and then you have to check and measure your work versus your peers. And that's when you really measure up. And if you're not good enough, you have to be able to look yourself in the eye and say, look, this is not good enough. I have to learn to do this better, or I'm not going to make it. So you always have to be trying. You always have to be learning. That's the best advice for anything that you do in life.
So how do you determine when you're not good at something whether you dig your heels in and learn more about it, or you find somebody that's better at it than you?
Well, that probably brings up the second thing I'm not good at, which would be delegation. There's a line there, like I ask myself the question, like, will me doing this give the customer a measurably better experience, or will me doing this give the customer a worse experience? And if I can't give the customer the better experience, I have to pass it off. And that's kind of how we do things here. If one of the sales guys gets backed in the corner because somebody can't get their deck height right, I can pop in on the phone call, and you maybe have to ask the question 5 different ways, but you can generally get the customer pointed in the right direction. And I would much rather, know when to pass the ball than to have somebody just yeah, and push you off the phone. So quite often, I just ask myself, if I do this and do my best, is it good enough? And if it's not good enough, then I have to pass it to somebody else.
Right. Well, we got pretty heavy there, and that's really what I'm trying to get after. So I appreciate you really giving us the true story of this whole deal. And now I just want to get to some a little bit more surface questions, a little bit easier.
Yeah, we got to get into some good stuff. I mean,
yeah, let's get some good stuff.
Deal.
So let's talk about a badass, game-changing product that you've seen in the last year. Is there anything out there that's blowing your mind? Tell me something that I don't know about.
It's everything. It's everything that's happening right now. The amount of power that you can get out of a relatively small turbocharger, or an affordable computer that does everything you want to do, that's exciting. When I got started in this, you didn't have the computers wouldn't run much more than a fuel pump. And now if you want to keep your car from flipping over, you can just buy an ECU and stick a sensor in it and pick a point where things starts to pull power out of it if it wants to rotate over. There's so much to be excited about. I mean, the product that Motec or AEM or Precision is putting out right now, it's like, how do you not get excited about that? Because for so long, you either had to have a lot of money, or the technology was in very small places in the world, where people weren't sharing the technology. Now it's like everything you want is within your reach. So there's a lot to be excited about. I mean, you have little tiny turbos on Evos that are making over 800 wheel on $3 fuel. I mean, that's pretty exciting.
Right?
Yeah.
It's crazy that you said something about the car flipping over, because Shane T in another interview was talking about, he had a pitch rate sensor on that Lexus that just went over the wall, and he's going to implement that strategy. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because that's, a topic of discussion right now. Is not only are you controlling the engine, but you have safety measures that you can implement too.
Right. I mean, you can't. And I'm not.
You can save somebody's life with an ECU now.
Exactly. Like, what if your car goes flying through the air? It's like you haven't been looking at short wheelbase, no wheelie bar, drag racing motorcycles close enough, because those guys have already been doing this for a while. Like, how do you think one of those short wheelbase bikes goes as fast as it does without flipping over? I mean, they'll put the tire 1.5 inches off the ground for 1,323 feet, and it works. Like, there's a lot of technology out there within reach.
Right. So I had no idea that they were doing that. I'm not involved in drag bikes. So they'll keep the front tire off the ground to keep 100% of the weight of the bike on the back tire?
Well, I mean, with the given...
that's the goal.
Yeah, with the given wheelbase and stuff, they don't really have a choice, right? Like, the thing wants to ride. Once it's there's a fair share of footage out there with small tire cars doing the same thing, where they just, it may be some of it's luck, because there's unfortunately a lot of cars blowing over in small tire racing right now, and it's like, well, how much of that can be avoided? That's probably a better question for Shane T, because I know the technology is there, and I tried as hard as I need to. I mean, I have my little small tire Mustang. It's still a H pattern stick shift, and it is going to be a complete disaster at its power level if I don't learn how to manage the wheelie better, because it's gonna stand on the bumper. It's gonna crush the oil pan. It's gonna destroy a couple grand in headers. All those things are gonna happen if I don't get good at that shortly. So
Yeah.
the technology is there though for sure.
So we didn't nail down one specific game-changing product, and you're saying it's just ECUs in general.
And
you got any one thing that's blowing your mind?
Well, I mean, you have in no order, of course, but the new Motec platform is extremely affordable compared to the old stuff. The AM Infinity is extremely affordable. The Haltech Elite is extremely affordable. Like, I mean, it wasn't too long ago that you had to have $10,000 management system to run your engine. And for what you can buy in, the main players, if you don't get too distracted with somebody's creative sales pitch, the main players in the ECU deal, I mean, they're putting out a really killer product nowadays. Killer product, especially for the money. I mean, I have a couple Motec boxes in my life. That's a lot of money when you add it up, and I could not exactly, I'm not saying I'm going to sell that stuff off for the other units, but I can, and I can put a sport bike back in my life for what I would save on ECUs. The stuff has really gotten affordable.
Yeah. So what's your favorite shop tool?
The Dyna.
Everybody says that. Everybody says Dyna.
Well, you have to keep in mind, like I can't afford to crash something on the road. We have extremely good insurance, but I never want to call a customer and say, hey, I backed your car into traffic today and it's totaled. Like I can do all the work I need to do on the dyno, and then I can say, Mr. Customer, go do your thing, send me a log, let's make sure everything's kosher, and I remove myself from all that risk. I would not, in today's day and age with attorneys and stuff, I would never want to get involved in a lawsuit if I crashed something on the street. It'd be terrible, especially with the power everything makes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. We try to not let the normal community know the kind of things that we're doing in the shop. Right?
No, I mean,
as far as power.
Yeah. Yeah. It's no good. It's, my girlfriend had never been in a 1,000+ horsepower car, and I took her for a ride in my Toyota, and she's like, it would have been a really cool video to film because she's got a pretty heavy accent, but it's like after that she just she floors the GTR in first gear, and she'll look over at you and she's like, this thing needs another 400 horsepower. It's like and it's got a pretty short first gear. So yeah, I mean, I play with my own stuff, but that's why I like the dyno, because I don't like the idea of crashing somebody else's car.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of disappointing, because customers are like, well, did you take it out and beat on it? I'm like, nope, not a chance.
Not a chance.
Not a chance. So,
what do you think the future of automotive performance is? Where do you see your company in a few years?
There's some numbers that we have in our mind of where we want to be. I would like to be able to continue to grow as a player in the industry. I would like to, Summit has a really big lead on everybody in the space that we work in, but there's a lot of room for 10 or 15 companies to be big players in the country, and I would like to be one of them.
How do you compete with Summit without being super niche? Like, niche is the only way that I would say you have a chance, because there's so much distribution and infrastructure in place already with places like Summit and Jegs. Right,
but isn't the answer's already in front of us? The fact that we exist means there's room. If Summit, if Jegs and Summit were, if they had all the reach they wanted, then there'd be a lot of these companies that just wouldn't even exist.
I feel like the industry's getting younger, and what I mean by that is the Summit doesn't have that new car smell. You know what I'm saying?
Let's not. I don't want them to get better at this.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Hopefully those guys love distributors and carburetors and flathead Fords, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. I like it.
Yeah.
Jay, thanks so much for being here. How do we connect with you and your company?
Well, because my last name gets botched all the time, and it's actually Mar. I did not pick Meagher Performance because that would have been the butt of a bunch of jokes. So it's realstreetperformance.com, and we are on Facebook, and we have a little YouTube channel like the rest of the world, or you can give us a call. But we're available. Most of the sales staff carries a cell phone in their pocket, and they're on various chat applications to be available to global customers all the time, and we really try to be as available as possible, you know.
How do we access your company through chat? Is that through realstreetperformance.com?
Yeah, if you go on the website, there's a live chat, and then there's also, like I said, most of the sales guys have that WhatsApp app, which there's a lot of people in the Middle East that heavily rely on that. You'd be surprised the support you can give over that thing. The other day I was helping a guy with the 1JZ and some camshaft problems, and it's like, you know, you're solving problems across the world with a cell phone in your pocket. It's amazing technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for next to nothing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's ridiculous. It's like that C.K. Lewis skit on why your cell phone is the best thing in the world. It's worth watching.
I'll check it out.
All right.
So thanks again, Jay. Really appreciate you being here. You can check out more details about Jay at doitforaliving.net and, of course, at realstreetperformance.com.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Jay. Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website, doitforaliving.net. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now. Seriously. I'll wait while you grab your phone. Open up the podcast app. Tap the subscribe button. When you subscribe, you help us gain momentum and